This is going to be like a video response to a question that I received. I actually received the question in my You Don't Interpret Dreams, Dreams Transform You from the Inside Out Holy Spirit video. But the question actually relates more to my wet dreams, obesity, masturbation is demonic possession, lust of the flesh, nocturnal emission video. So this is from YOLO Bear. And the last part of the question is, and I'm quoting Yolo Bear here, I'm realizing that even masturbation or the thought of it is basically hindering me from feeling connected with God. I am totally willing to give up my sexuality. I will never masturbate or have sex with another person if that is what God wants from me. But now, can you avoid the feeling of being turned on by someone or some idea? It's really irritating me. Thank you. And again, this is more related to my wet dreams, obesity, masturbation is demonic possession video. So I'm going to actually reference more of that video, even though the comment was placed in my You Don't Interpret Dreams video. Now, in my wet dreams, obesity, masturbation is demonic possession, lust of the flesh video, I spoke about how masturbation and lustful thoughts creates cracks that allow demons to enter you or influence you. But what I didn't discuss is the fact that why, well, I did discuss why, you're basically in line with their sinful thoughts. Like you're performing a sin, and therefore you have something in common with the demons. And so you both can share that fantasy. Within marriage, however, and I didn't make this clear in that video, sex is fine within marriage because you have a willing participant to act out your sexuality with, of the opposite sex. And that's how children are produced. So, sex within marriage is fine. Now, I want to discuss the difference between sex within marriage and masturbation or having lustful thoughts and fantasies. And I told Yolo Bear in the comment section of You Don't Interpret Your Dreams that essentially you are producing pornography in your mind when you have those lustful thoughts and when those lustful thoughts lead to orgasm. So if you think about the filth that is produced, and their pornography is not, something that is outside of mainstream, because now, they have pornography in mainstream movies, rated R movies, basically, where you're seeing people perform sexual acts on television. You are essentially creating pornography in your mind when you have those lustful thoughts and when you have sex with yourself through orgasm and masturbation. And that is the sin that is allowing these demons access to you, because you don't have like a willing participant who you are married to act out these fantasies. I'll use myself as an example. There was an object, and I say object as an actual person that was the object of my sexual thoughts. Now, this person wouldn't be able to act out what I would be fantasizing about. You see what I'm saying? So therefore, I would create within my mind the playing out, the different scenarios that we'd be in engaging in sexual activity. And so therefore, it would be a pornography created within my mind. But how do I know that this other person would have wanted to act out what I was playing in my mind? So therefore, it's not like within marriage where you have two willing participants who are expressing love for each other, hopefully, and that being, the agreement between them at that point in time. Whereas when you are masturbating or when you are having lustful thoughts, It is only you, and you are making that other person an object to act out your fantasies, or perhaps the fantasies that you've seen on television or the fantasies you've seen in pornography. So you're creating this false image of this other person in order to act out your personal fantasies. Now, this other person can't, for whatever reason, whether it's because they don't know you have these thoughts or they're not in physical form or whatever, but they can't act out these thoughts that you're having because you're not married to them, and so they can't act them out. And even if you were married to them, if you're playing these lustful thoughts in your mind, how do you know that they would want to participate in them? That's why it's important that sex be between a husband and a wife, but not, God doesn't say, fantasize continually about different scenarios and stuff like that, but sex within marriage, so you have two willing participants at all times. But if that other person is not able to act out these sexual scenarios that you play in your mind, then who will? And that's where the demons come in, because if you can't get the other person to act out what you're thinking for whatever reason, and you're not married to them, then a demon will fill that void and they will act it out for them. For me, for instance, I've had a few dreams where the demons actually came in the form of this particular person that I was having lustful thoughts about. So they appeared to me in dreams in that person's form, and they were ready and willing to act out my fantasies. So that's opening the door for spirits other than the object of your affection to come in and be the face of your fantasy, because you have turned that other person, the person that you're fantasizing about, into an object. And a roaming spirit can, take on the form of that person and act out your fantasies. So it's not, that's why it's not ideal to create these sexual fantasies in your mind, because you're in sin, because you're not having sex within the confines of marriage. You're having sex outside of marriage in your imagination or without the participation of your spouse. And therefore, that opens the door, creates a crack for a demonic entity to come in and pretend to be that person, or just to act out your sexual desires. I didn't make that clear in the last video, and so I can understand why YOLO Bear thought I was saying, no sex, no. But again, sex within marriage is normal. It's the sex that we create in our minds that is abnormal, and that leads to, because we're objectifying the person to act out our fantasies, we allow that object, that empty object that we've made them, to just blindly carry out our fantasies. We have an empty object that a demonic spirit can embody and carry out our fantasies, and therefore it actually diminishes the person that we are fantasizing about, because they become no longer important as long as we have something to appear as them in our dreams and act out our fantasies for us. And then it's through that we realize that these lustful thoughts, and even in the wet dreams, obesity, masturbation, even with food, compare sex to food. We eat food in order to live. We have sex, we reproduce children and express love for our spouse, but that can get out of control, and that's how people become obese, because food becomes their drug, and they don't eat to be full. They don't eat to, for nourishment. They eat as a drug. They eat because they're sad. They eat because they're empty. They eat because they're bored. They eat because they've lost control. They eat because the demons inside of them tell them to eat. They eat because there's a certain taste that they're addicted to. Same with sexual thoughts. We're not having these sexual thoughts in order to express love for a certain person, because when you love someone, then you don't objectify them. You don't turn them into an object in order to have them act out your sexual thoughts. You allow them in the flesh to be themselves and behave in an autonomous way sexually. But when you create an object, an image of them, and have them act out these sexual fantasies that you have, you've objectified them, you've cheapened them. They're no longer autonomous beings. And therefore, sex is no longer linked with love and procreation, but it becomes an addiction, something that leads to your orgasm. You objectify and humiliate a person um, in your mind for your own sexual gratification, for your own orgasm. For that empty high that you feel, just like a drug addict. That 10-minute, and it's not even 10 minutes. That uh, 30 seconds or a minute of a high that you feel, you objectify the person you supposedly love. So that's why you should not have these lustful thoughts. And it's something where you think you can't do without. Like when I was obese, like I was like, how can you do without cake? Like I was in a health class, and the professor was saying how he doesn't eat cake, and I was thinking on my mind, how can he go without cake? How can anyone go without cake? And here I am sitting here. I haven't had cake in, man, a long, long, long time. I mean, at least half a decade. Yeah, at least half a decade I haven't had cake. And guess what? I'm still alive. And guess what? I don't have any desire for it because it's only an empty high. It's bad for me. I know it's bad for me. I know that if I consume cake, what it'll do to my body. You see what I'm saying? So when you're when you're in the throes of addiction, you don't see how you can exist outside of the lustful thoughts. But once you realize the long-term effect of constantly having these lustful thoughts and it pulling you deeper and deeper and deeper into the abyss of demonic control, and to the point where you can't function right unless you have an orgasm every day, then you realize that you're slowly losing your self-control, and there's nothing sexy or glamorous or enjoyable about that. And therefore, the benefit, the quote benefit, does not outweigh the cost. And therefore, it becomes like cake, sickening. I get sickened when I think about like double fudge chocolate cake, stuff like that, to where it's too sweet. It's too good, so to speak, to where, I'm sickened by it, because it's the enhancement of flavors, just like the orgasm is, the enhancement of this pleasurable feeling that continually draws you to something that's unhealthy for you in the long run. And just, if you concentrate on the actual result of these lustful thoughts, like you're actually drawing demons to you, and the more you have, the less control you have over yourself. And you realize that you slowly lose your self-control as you give in to these lustful thoughts and these orgasms with no object, with no marriage partner involved. You just get caught up in your own fantasies, and they lead you into the grip of demonic possession and influence. And so, whenever you have like a sexual thought creep up, and you're not married and your spouse is not in your presence, just pray about it, and just also, as you pray about it, think about the fact that if you engage in that thought, if you entertain that thought, then you bring yourself closer to the demons that want to act that thought out or be the object that you've created in your mind. And therefore, you can both enjoy sin together that will be short-lived and will have long-term consequences. So it's really not as hard as it seems to not be preoccupied with sexual thoughts. But like I said, within marriage, it's fine. Sex is fine. But just don't objectify people in order to carry out your sexual fantasies.